Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Benji-Sales live chat. It's so good to be back. It's so good to see everybody. How are you doing today? I am glad to be back. I'm glad to see everyone. This week has not been as busy as I would say some of the more recent weeks have been lately, right? We've been very lucky in that recently it's like every week that we get on here, we've had so many topics to talk about. Today, I would say not as stacked as it has been, but there are still some really good stuff we can discuss. Probably the biggest one is going to be about Activision Blizzard. If you guys have questions about that, we have had some big updates on that. I know that this whole topic has gotten a little old, right? We've been discussing it for now, what is it, like a year? And I think a lot of us are ready for this thing to just wrap up and be finished. But we have more stuff happening, right? It's the biggest deal in the entire history of the gaming industry. So I can see why A, it's taking a while, and B, why it's still such a hot button discussion topic. So we can talk about that. What are the updates? Well, we kind of have, I would say, three big updates. First of all, we have Brazil has approved the acquisition, and they did it with basically no stipulations, right? They just said this can go through. You don't need to make concessions. You don't need to say that Sony has this, games are still going to be on PlayStation. They basically said you can do whatever you want. Their ruling came out to be that their goal is to protect the consumer and not any companies. And they said that they felt this was not going to lead to anti-competitiveness. And so they approved it. Now, is this a big deal? Yes. Brazil is a very big, government. It's a very big economy, but by no means is this anywhere near done. And this is not the biggest, right? The biggest ones that Microsoft has to make sure they get are the FTC, Europe, UK, because it's their second biggest market. And they are facing a lot of pushback in the UK. So there might be some questions about that, some discussion around it. Is what the UK is saying fair? Are they right? Is Microsoft right on this? I'm sure you guys are going to have some questions on that if you want to. I would say the other third big thing, because the second was the issues in the UK that they're running into. The third one is going to be Strauss-Zelnick from Take-Two, who is one of the biggest third-party publishers in the entire industry, saying that they are for the acquisition and they think it's a good thing for the industry. So this is a very good thing to have on Microsoft's side, having someone that's not part of their company, someone that's invested in this industry, saying that they think it's a good idea. So we can talk about maybe Strauss-Zelnick's comments, if you guys agree with it or not. And that's another big one. So a few other topics we can discuss. Overwatch 2 has had a disastrous launch. We can talk about what that might mean for Blizzard, what it might mean for Overwatch. The Mario movie trailer came out and did gigantic views. We can talk about if we think that's going to be the biggest video game movie ever. I have a hunch. I feel that it's going to be. So we can talk about that if you want to. And there's a new report that PlayStation is going to ship 30 million PlayStation 5s next year. That's coming from Inside Gaming. So we can talk about if that's a realistic expectation or not, if we think it's true, and so much more. So if this is your first time ever as part of my live chat, the way it works, it's a stream, it's a show, it's 100% driven by you, your comments, your questions. We basically just break down the latest news in the video game industry. There's going to be two ways to do that. First of all, there's free questions. You just type a question, whatever you want, pops into chat, and I get to as many free questions as I possibly can. If you want to guarantee that I get to your question, the way to do that's going to be the super chat option. You just type a donation of whatever you want. It alerts me, and I get to super chats immediately. However, don't feel pressured or obligated to donate in super chat. It's just a way to help support me and the channel and also guarantee that I get to your question, because I very rarely get to all the free questions. So if you're in the stream right now and you do have a question that's not a super chat, I would advise you to drop it now. You always want to get these questions in on the stream as quickly as possible, because we very rarely can hit all of them because chat usually fills up pretty heavy. All right, I think that's it for the intro. Let's get rocking on your comments and questions. I don't think there's any real housekeeping notes that I have. Nothing big coming up for me, no podcast appearances or anything. So I think we're good to go, guys. We have a couple super chats kicking us off first. First of all, Timmer72299 here with a 5. Do you think we will see a die-hard AAA game? Plus, it would be cool if Bethesda got another shot at a Terminator game. Plus, love your vids. Well, thank you so much, Timmer. As always, so supportive in every single chat. So, Die Hard game, I find pretty unlikely because that IP feels mostly dead. I think there was some rumors going around that they were maybe going to make another movie. They were exploring it, but I'll be honest, I haven't kept up with that. So I don't know if that movie's been canceled or if it's still going to happen or if it's coming through. Now, in terms of the Bethesda Terminator, that is interesting because you're definitely going to get another Terminator game, right? There's just no way. This brand, even though it's nowhere near as strong as it once was, it's still just a huge IP. I expect you're going to get more Terminator movies eventually. I expect, this is going to be, I feel like, one of these brands that's always trying to be rebooted. So a game I do expect at some point. Now, would Bethesda be able to do it? I would say fairly unlikely under Xbox. Xbox doesn't seem to love the idea of doing a ton of licensed games, at least that we've seen so far. We know they were approached by Marvel, for example, for a game back before Spider-Man came out. This came out a little while ago, and they said no, they didn't want to do a Spider-Man game. They wanted to focus on their own IPs. Or not Spider-Man, but a Marvel game. So it seems, and I know that there's the whole Indiana Jones game coming, but that deal was signed before Bethesda was acquired. So it would be really cool. I would love to see Bethesda do something with Terminator, right? Hardcore M-rated sci-fi type game. But I would list it as pretty unlikely because I don't know if outside of Indiana Jones we're going to see many licensed games from Xbox Studios. Never know. Could happen. But at least in the past, it seems like something that they didn't necessarily want to do. So thank you so much for that super chat, Timmer. A second super chat here from Matt Duffy. What is up, Matt Duffy? Always so supportive, always so positive. Benji, have you ever felt like you're growing out of gaming? Games don't feel as fun as when I was younger. They now feel like products, not experiences. Well, I would say, Matt, that is actually very, very common. You're not alone in feeling that way. I hear this all the time, right? Especially as people get older, they have more responsibilities. Some people have kids, people have 40-hour work weeks, right? Like, suddenly it gets like, and games aren't necessarily like a movie or a TV show where you can just pop in for like an hour and bounce. There's some games like that, but a lot of games, it's kind of a time commitment to get through them. So I would say that feeling, Matt Duffy, is super common. Lots of people have it. I personally don't experience this much, but I also have a bit of an obsessive personality about things that I'm like into. Once I get into something, I'm like all in. And gaming has been that way for me for my entire life, but you guys have heard me talk on here. There's all kinds of stuff I'm like that with, right? MMA and combat sports, I'm all in on, science and astronomy, I'm all in on, really like music, like everything. I have a bit of an obsessive personality. So, gaming, I don't experience that much. Every once in a while, I feel a little bit of burnout, right? Every once in a while, I'm like, man, because I play a lot of games. So I will say I experience burnout a little bit, but I don't, get to where I feel like I'm growing out of it. But Matt, that's very common. So you are far from the only person that feels that way. I hear it all the time. Frostbite Slash here with a 20 super chat. Thank you so much, Frostbite. That's extremely generous. You always are so extremely generous with the super chats. Thank you so much. I seen your tweet on Twitter about moving into the gaming industry, and I hope you succeed. And wish you nothing but the best. If you ever think about setting up a Patreon, just know I'll be there day one at the highest tier. Okay, so we'll go over this really quick because I did send out a tweet about it. So I do, I sent out a tweet. If you guys missed it, if you just follow me on YouTube and not Twitter, I do want to really work hard on being able to transition out of retail next year, right? I'm setting myself a goal. Obviously, earlier in the year is better, but in general, I want this to be my last holiday season in retail. I've done retail quite literally my entire adult life. Since 2007, whenever I was graduating high school, from that point on, I've been in retail my entire life. And if you haven't worked retail, I can tell you it's a grind, especially doing it for as long as I have. And I'm super passionate about gaming, so you guys know that. So my goal is to transition in this next year to where I don't have to work retail anymore. Now, how that's going to work, I'm not 100% sure. I am going to set up a Patreon. I'm probably going to launch it either in November or December. So in the next 2 months, to be clear here, early on, I don't exactly know what my plan is. So this Patreon is not going to be something where I'm going to be asking you guys, follow my Patreon and give me, $50 or $100 a month, like super high tiers or anything like that. Until I figure out exactly what my plan is, exactly if I am going to go work for someone else, if I'm going to try and completely go on my own and, have the community help support me, I don't 100% know. But I am going to launch this Patreon soon. It's just going to have like a $1 supporter tier. You can just do $1 a month just to help support me. It's a buck. If you don't want to give me a buck, believe me, I understand it. If you do like my content and you want to help see me transition over into doing this full time, it's going to be a buck a month. I might do one tier higher than that. I'm thinking about doing a $5 tier a month where I do either a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter, where it's kind of like a long form newsletter where I break down kind of like the biggest industry news and sales data and business stuff and kind of write out my thoughts and send it to you guys, the people that do the $5 tier. I don't know if I'll do every week right off the bat as I kind of get used to it. It might be every 2 weeks at first as I kind of get used to writing. I've never done like a newsletter or anything like that. So I'm thinking about doing something like that. If you guys have any ideas for any additional tiers or ideas on what I should do moving forward, let me know. I can tell you I'm already having a lot of people reach out to me about potentially writing for them and things like that. So we'll see, Frostbite. I'm not 100% sure exactly how this is going to play out. The Patreon is coming. It's not going to have any crazy expensive tiers. I mean, maybe if we get to a point where I'm like full-time on my own and I'm doing streams like every day and I'm trying to pump out YouTube content, maybe at that point I would introduce some higher tiers. But until I know what my game plan is, it's just going to be like a $1 supporter and then maybe a $5 like newsletter tier or something like that. But yeah, that's the goal, Frostbite. The goal is that this is my last holiday season in retail. I've been doing it my whole life. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I really don't want to be 65, and still being a entry-level retail employee, because that's what I am, I'm just the lowest guy on the totem pole at a major retailer. So it's going to be hard to kind of retire and live life that way, so I got to make some moves. So thank you so much, Frostbite. I really appreciate that. All right, we had a couple more super chats pop in here. Let me hit those really quick. Thank you so much, guys. Super chats are very generous already in this chat. Thank you so much. Forzathon is back. How can CMA report bring up PS fearing future differences like exclusive content between Call of Duty Xbox and PlayStation versions as a concern considering the past few years? This is actually pretty crazy. I'm going to be honest with you. Are they really that incompetent as Jez hints? Okay. So let's talk about the UK side of things really quick. Does the UK have some good points about like being diligent about investigating this? I would say yes, they have some good points. Now you guys know, but don't worry, Forzathon, I'm going to agree with you. I think this particular point is absolutely insane. Like absolutely insane. Quite literally insane. Like I don't even understand how you look at the industry and look at this and think that this is okay, what they said here in this particular thing. So here's the thing. I'll just be upfront about it right now. I am in favor of this acquisition, right? I've told you guys this a bunch of times. I'm also of the opinion I don't want to see tons more of publisher acquisitions. I'm in favor of this particular one because Activision itself is a business that's already in all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems at Activision. And I believe that this acquisition will not only be beneficial for Microsoft, I personally think that this will be very beneficial to the people working at Activision. So in this particular case, I'm in favor of it because I think that the people that work there, the thousands and thousands of devs that are making these games for us, I think it's going to be better for them to be under Microsoft. Better leadership, and I also think it's a good thing for Microsoft, right? I think it's beneficial to both parties. I don't, however, want to see a situation where just like every single publisher's bought, right? I'm going to be honest with you. If Microsoft does get this acquisition, I hope it's the last publisher they get. I don't care if they buy more independent studios. Anyone can found an independent studio. Those can come around tomorrow. We see it all the time. Announcements, new studio, new studio, new studio, new studio. I think there should be basically, I'll be honest with you, no restrictions on individual studio purchases, whether it's Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. Literally anyone can go out there, even with 5 people, and found a studio. Does that mean it's easy? No, but I'm just saying anyone can do it, right? You can be an indie dev, even on your own as one person with Unreal Engine, and start making a game. So individual studios, buy as many as you want. However, founding an entire publisher and becoming one of the biggest publishers in the industry, that's an entirely different order of magnitude of difficulty, right? Very, 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 very few companies will be able to ever reach there. We've even seen ginormous businesses like Amazon extremely struggling to do it with all of the resources they have. So individual studios, free grabs. Like I said, unlimited. You guys, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, whoever, buy as many of them as you want because anyone can found a studio. Publishers, I don't want to see too many more of these, but I am in favor of the Activision one. Now, the good points that the UK is raising in that they're doing their due diligence, or other places like the FTC, for example, this is a big deal in terms of like the future of subscriptions, the future of streaming. That is the main fear from these places, is that Microsoft will become so powerful in the streaming and subscription space, because everyone's yelling at you about Call of Duty. That's all the headlines you're seeing. Is Call of Duty going to be exclusive? Is Call of Duty not going to be exclusive? I'm going to be real with you. While Call of Duty is being brought up a lot, it's being brought up a lot because of its being able to be tied to subscription streamings, things like that. That's the bigger fear, is that in 10 or 15 years, Microsoft is such a juggernaut in those two areas that no one else can compete. Now, I personally do not believe that to be true. I think it could potentially be true that Microsoft is the leader in streaming and subscriptions. However, the idea that they would be so powerful in that space that no one else can even compete, that I don't agree with. And the goal of a government is not to keep the same companies in power. So for example, if PlayStation's the market leader, it is not, the CMA or the FTC's job to make sure PlayStation stays number one. That's not their job at all. In fact, they should have quite literally zero say in that, because fair business is that anyone can rise to the top. What they want to do, though, is make sure things are still competitive, right? Like I said, I think they still are competitive even if Microsoft gets this deal. Call of Duty is a huge brand, but is it the biggest brand in the world? I'm going to be real with you. It's not anymore. Fortnite's bigger than Call of Duty. Yes, does Call of Duty sell more boxed products? Sure, Fortnite's a free-to-play game. Look at every single most played list you can see. Even with Warzone, which is also free-to-play, Fortnite is always ahead of it on basically all platforms, right? There's tons of other games. We've talked about this on chat a lot. Apex Legends is a beast. This isn't to say that Call of Duty is not a big deal. It's a ginormously big deal. And in terms of boxed sales games, it's still among the biggest games in the entire world. It's just the idea that, it's the only game. Nothing can compete with Call of Duty, and if Microsoft gets it and puts it in Game Pass, it's game over for everyone else. This is a false narrative. But these companies are doing their due diligence and investigating this heavily and making sure that this is true, and not just listening to some random guy on Twitter or YouTube just telling you that it's fair. So all of that, listen, I disagree with some of the things they're saying, but I get why they are so concerned about it. The thing that I find utterly insane, if I was reading it right, was what you are noting here, Forzathon. I believe one of the things that statements in the CMA article that came out, or the comments, the statements, is that Call of Duty in the future, what Sony wants and what the CMA is kind of regurgitating, is that Microsoft can't have anything in the future on its platform with Call of Duty, not just games, anything that PlayStation does not. This is utter madness. PlayStation, to be clear, has had tons of things for Call of Duty that Xbox has not had for years, whether it's exclusive beta times, whether it's exclusive early access to DLC, whether it's just straight up exclusive skins and stuff. If that part is true, it is utter madness to consider that to be fair, okay? Even if they want to put the stipulation, I don't agree with it, but if they want to put the stipulation, hey, you still have to at least release the game on PlayStation, listen, I don't agree with that, but if that is what it takes to make sure that Microsoft acquires this, okay, probably worth it, still release the game on PlayStation. But the idea that, Microsoft, because they own the brand and it's still released on PlayStation, can't have hey, you get exclusive beta access, or this game runs better on Xbox, or you get skins that you don't get because you're a Game Pass member on PlayStation. If that part is true, that they're saying this, that is one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my entire life. Literally, it is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. So I don't know if this is being misreported or what. But that is just silliness of an unbelievable level. And what I would say is incompetent, I don't know, but a complete lack of understanding about the industry, I would say yes. The reality is, I'm going to be real with you guys. A lot of you in this chat understand the gaming industry more than the people doing these investigations. That's going to be an inflammatory comment, but it's not false. It is a true statement. Many of you here understand more than the FTC does. Now, does that mean that the FTC or the CMA know more about business in general? Yes. Most of these people have done zero research until now. They're doing it now. I'm not saying they're not doing it now, and they are asking experts. They're going straight to the CEOs. But many of these people, I talk to all kinds of people all the time, not in the FTC, all kinds of people all the time that don't know anything about the gaming industry. So they're going to have to do these big investigations. They're going to have to get experts. They're going to have to go into it. But if that particular comment is true, I'm not going to say that the entire CMA is incompetent, but I'm going to say they have a severe lack of understanding about the video game industry. Okay. Anthony Johnson here with a 10. 30 million PS5s? What? I'm still shocked, but next year does have exclusives like Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, and potentially more. Is 30 million possible? What more do you think Sony needs to hit 30 million? Okay, let's talk about this report, and thank you so much for that $10 super chat, Anthony Johnson. That's very, very generous. So this report came from Inside Gaming. I believe that's what it's called. It's Inside Gaming or Insider Gaming. This is Tom Henderson's new website. Now, Tom Henderson has been I would consider a very reliable insider, right, if you will. I mean, his website's called Insider Gaming, so I don't think he would mind if I called him, an insider. It's literally what he names his thing. I would say he's very reliable. Like anyone else, there's going to be misses sometimes, right? I consider Grubb super reliable. Grubb's going to have misses sometimes, right? Anytime you're doing this sort of like investigating on stuff, I tell you guys all the time, there's all sorts of false narratives and false info that gets spread around like crazy. You're going to have misses sometimes, but as long as you're like fairly consistently right, that's really what matters to me. Unless you're like, you live or die by it. Like Jason Schreier, I think, is the best, but Jason also doesn't put out as much on this sort of thing as like Grubb and Henderson does, right? Him being an insider for Jason is more of like a side thing. He's more of just like a straight up journalist. So him, whenever he puts something out there, he's dead set on it, right? He doesn't put it out there unless he's like 1,000,000% sure, because he considers himself just like a straight up journalist with the inside stuff on the side. Now, this particular report, I believe that Sony is going to have a significant increase in shipments next year. We're seeing huge evidence of that happening already right now. I think PlayStation's lining up for a great holiday season. We have a lot of evidence of it. I've been tweeting out some evidence. You've seen other people like David Gibson tweeting out evidence. Looks like they're very much ramping up PlayStation 5 production. So do I expect a huge year next year for PlayStation 5? Yeah. In fact, I won't be surprised if they hit 20 million, which, by the way, is huge. That puts them, even at 20 million, that puts them at like the biggest PlayStation 4 years ever, right? And almost the biggest PlayStation 2 year. I believe the peak shipment PS2 year is 22 million. So if they get to 20 plus million, you're talking one of the biggest years ever for the PlayStation brand, let alone 30. I'm going to be real here. I'm pretty doubtful on that 30 million number. I'm not going to tell you outright that Tom Henderson's wrong. I don't know. I haven't asked Sony about this. But it is such a high number. To put it in perspective how high this number is, guys, this is bigger than the peak Switch year. Even think about how much of a juggernaut Switch has been. This is higher than the highest year Switch has ever had. Now, they got close. I believe it was over 28 million for the peak Switch year, but they still didn't hit 30. So over 30, you're talking not only the biggest PlayStation, year ever, 10 million higher than PlayStation 4. You're also talking bigger than Switch's peak year with Animal Crossing and lockdowns during the pandemic. This just seems like an astronomical goal. If this is true, I would say I'm doubtful Sony can actually hit it. And I'm doubtful they even announce that number. I'm expecting, like I said, a big year. I can see Sony coming out and saying we want 20 plus million PS5s next year. I actually can believe that. But 30? Oof, that is crazy. Even with big games, that it's just the sheer production volume is absurd. So we'll see, right? We'll see, Anthony. This has not been confirmed by Sony, to be clear. I had a lot of comments on my tweet and a lot of retweets saying, how could Sony say this? How could Sony believe this? To be clear here, we do not know for sure that this is accurate yet. This is just what's being reported. Sony themselves have not said it. So we need to see if they actually confirm this. But I'm doubtful they hit that number. It's too extreme in my opinion. But if they do, wow, it would be literally incredible. So we'll see. We'll see, Anthony. I do believe the part of the report about the new disk drive list PlayStation coming next year. I 1000% believe that because it makes sense. It's going to bring their costs down, only producing one model. And also, it's probably going to be smaller, I believe. We don't 100% know, but I believe it'll probably be a little bit more compact, a little more slimmed down, which also saves them on cost for things like shipping weight. So, and just pure materials of plastic, right? It might be a small amount difference per unit, but when you're making millions and millions and millions of units, if you can bring the overall, even just chassis and plastic size down, once you're talking millions of units, even just that, not counting weight for shipment, just that saves you a lot of costs across millions of units. So I do believe that part of it. It's just that 30 million number. That's a little crazy. I think we have one more super chat here from Timmer. Thank you so much, Timmer, with another 2 super chat. That's your second one. Thank you so much. Also want to move away from retail. Feel your pain. Yeah, Timmer, I hope you get it as well. Retail sucks, right? It's one of those things. It's a good learning opportunity. I can see, I think, there's always this statement you see people make that are jokes, like everyone should work retail or fast food at least once in your life. I kind of agree with that because I can tell you the way some people treat me as the guests when they come in, that the sheer level of rudeness that you get, you can pretty much tell that they've never worked a job like this. So it does teach you sympathy. Like anytime I go to a retailer now and I can see they're stressed out or, things are tough, man, I'm like so kind to these people. Or fast food, I'm like, listen, you take your time, you're good, don't sweat it. It does treat you sympathy for people that do these kinds of work because you deal with a lot of mean people. That's just the reality. Any job you're going to have some mean people, but retail and fast food, just the sheer volume of people you're dealing with, you deal with a lot of jerks. A lot of great people too, right? It's not everybody, but it's hard. It's a grind. Thank you so much, Timmer, for that. And I hope you get out of retail too. All right, super chats are cleared. Let's get to your free questions, guys. Thank you for the super generous super chat so far. Johnny G22 saying, what's up, Benji? Hope all is well. Things are great, Johnny. Things have really improved for me in the last, few months. I'm back to lifting regularly, which makes me so happy. I feel so much better. So good. Things are going good, Johnny. Brooby, do you think Switch 2 or Pro is coming with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom in May? So I don't know if you guys have seen this. I would say I do believe it's coming in 2023, but I haven't been necessarily on board the May train. But did you guys see what Digital Foundry said like 2 weeks ago? I think I talked about it here on chat. To be clear, Digital Foundry has never outright said, sources tell us that this is coming in May. But Richard Ledbetter was talking about this whenever the new chip got leaked, and straight up from NVIDIA, right? And what he was saying, and Richard's going to know a lot, right? I'm not necessarily saying that he knows all the sources are telling him, but he knows how these processes work. The guys at Digital Foundry can tell you are very well connected. They talk to everyone in the industry about all kinds of stuff. They knew about the Series S before it was even announced, right? Microsoft talked to them about it before there was any sort of reveal on it. So he said that the chip leaking to him made him believe, like the way it was leaked, it is out of testing phase, meaning that it's ramping up to production phase, which means doesn't necessarily mean Switch 2 is being made right now, but it means like he doesn't believe that they're still testing it. Like it's done. The chip itself is done, is what he kind of said he feels like with the way this leaked. And the other thing he said is that he is expecting it to launch around Zelda. Now, that to me seems, I don't know. There are some things that would explain the very weird way Pikmin 4 was announced, the very weird way that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been. They've shown you virtually nothing on this game, and it's been announced for years. Every time they show Tears of the Kingdom, it's like seconds of gameplay, right? And then Pikmin 4 had that very strange announcement that I've almost never seen before, where they announce a game and they don't show you footage. That's not uncommon. We see CG reveals all the time. The thing that made it bizarre was they announced the game and then they showed you screenshots. That was strange. I can't say I've ever seen that. It's like, here, we're going to announce the game like in a video form, not just they announce it and put screenshots on the internet. They, in a direct, announce the game and they're like, we're not going to show you it, but we will show you some screenshots. It was very weird. Can't say I've seen that too many times. So do I think, I've said this, do I think Switch 2 is coming next year? I do. I do think Switch 2 is coming next year. Is it coming as early as May? That I'm not so sure on. I could see them waiting till the holiday season, but I will say I do expect this in 2023. I know some people are very much against that idea. Some people are very much for 2024 or later, but I really think that it is coming next year in some way. So I'm not going to lock myself into saying May, but next year I am feeling good about it. I think it makes sense because you can keep selling Switch 1 alongside Switch 2. And when Switch 2 launches, either way, guys, these games are going to be cross-gen, I think, for at least, at minimum, a year, and probably most of the first-party Nintendo games will be cross-gen for 2 years, because that install base is so big. And I also noted I expect Switch 2 to be more expensive. I think it's going to launch at $400. So they could still keep Switch 1 on shelves, still have that cheaper option, still get the install base higher and have cross-gen games. But for those of us that have had Switches for years and years and years, I mean, there's tens and tens and tens of millions of us, they can start slowly upgrading them to Switch 2 starting next year, and then over a year or two phase out that cross-gen period, right? I think that makes a lot of sense on business, and I do expect that. That is what I expect Nintendo's going to do. Okay, I think we had a super chat hit. Let me hit that really fast. We did. Frostbite with a second super chat. Thank you, Frostbite. That's incredibly kind. Do you think God of War was potentially struggling to meet its release date? Yes. It had 5 non-first party support studios working on it with Bluepoint and Valkyrie. Yes. I can tell you in the past, I want to be careful what I say here, but I can tell you in the past, Santa Monica has been one of the studios. They don't get as much attention on it as some others have. And this isn't to say Santa Monica is a bad studio. I know some people at Santa Monica, and they're great, and I think they make amazing games. It's just what I can tell you, Frostbite, they are one of the studios that in the past has been known for crunch culture to a degree. A lot of crunch goes down at Santa Monica. Now, we can have different opinions on is crunch justified? Is not crunch justified? And this isn't a super secret. If you guys ever watched like the Raising Kratos, I believe it was called, documentary, you saw how troubled the production of God of War 2018 was, and how in a lot of ways that game didn't come together until right at the end, right? You had that infamous story about Shuhei Yoshida coming and playing the game, and he hated it. And it kind of made him panic. They're like, oh my God, Shuhei Yoshida hates this game. In the end, I think, Yasp loved it because everything kind of came together at the end. But do I believe that they had huge issues getting this game done? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've told you guys, and I think the quality is going to be there. So to be clear, whenever I say this, I'm not saying, and that means the game's going to be bad. Very much doubt that. I think it's going to be incredible. But do I think they absolutely struggled to get this thing out the door? I can basically promise you that. It's been a struggle for anyone in the industry right now. We've talked about this a bunch on the chat, let alone the follow-up to like one of the highest reviewed games of all time, where you're going to be kind of a perfectionist on it because you know the expectations for the follow-up. So yeah, Frostbite, I'm sure this thing was brutally difficult to get out the door. But I'm glad to see they made the date. And I expect the quality to be there. I really do expect it to be there, but I'm sure it was a unbelievable challenge to get it done. And thank you so much for that super chat, Frostbite. All right, Michael Yu. As you know, court documents show subscriptions generated $2.9 billion for Microsoft in 2021. Yes. Do you think if that amount includes gold? I believe it does. So I don't think we've gotten actually a definitive answer on this. But a lot of people reported it as Game Pass alone generated $2.9 billion. And I even at first was like, God dang, almost 3 billion already for Game Pass. And like I said, I expect Game Pass to grow significantly in the coming years. Because they haven't even had a high first-party output yet. And we've seen from the rankings list, a lot of people are on Games Pass specifically for the first party. Like half of the games in the top 18 are first-party titles. So I expect that to grow a lot. So I was even like, God dang, they're already at almost $3 billion in revenue. That is unbelievable to already be there. However, when you read the document, it says subscriptions. It doesn't specifically say Game Pass. Michael, I am inclined, and I don't know this to be clear, I am inclined to believe that would include gold. What I will say, though, is that I think most people with gold are now on Game Pass Ultimate nowadays. We know that it's over 25 million subs. I won't be surprised if it's like 30 million subs or around there by now. And gold's install base couldn't have been too gigantic because of the total sales volume of Xbox One. So I suspect, and I know Game Pass is also available on PC. It seems clear to me that the majority of subscribers, however, are on console. I suspect the vast majority of people that have gold are on Game Pass at this point. It just makes sense. If you have gold, why would you not buy Game Pass Ultimate? Because it's not that much more expensive and you get gold as well as all of Game Pass. So I suspect the vast bulk of people are, but there are going to still be a chunk of people that are only on gold. So I think it is included in that. But it's still a huge number. Like I do suspect the bulk of that 2.9 billion is Game Pass. I suspect the bulk of it is, but not the entirety, if this document is right, in terms of like how we're reading it. Joseki. Hello, Benji. What is up? Great to see you, Joseki. A bit of a broad question. October is packed with releases. Is there any game you see tracking especially well and or especially poor? Ooh, interesting with the second part. Relative to expectations. So it depends what you mean. Because I think a game like Plague Tale Requiem is going to do very well because I have a feeling it's going to review very high. I don't, however, expect a Plague Tale Requiem to sell like 1 billion copies. I think it's going to be a huge hit on Game Pass. And I do think it'll sell, on PlayStation and Steam and stuff. But I'm not expecting this to do like crazy numbers in terms of raw sales. Good, but not crazy. But I think it's going to do really big on Game Pass. So I think that game is, because I'm telling you, I'll be surprised if this doesn't review very well. Very well. I'll be surprised from a little bit of the buzz I've been hearing. And considering how good the first game was on a tighter budget, I think Requiem might surprise people. We'll see. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that's going to review very highly. Scorn is a game that I think is not going to really sell, I'll be honest, because I don't think, unlike Requiem, where I think reviews are going to be extremely positive, I don't think Scorn's going to go that way from some of the people that have said some things and stuff like that. I think it might do pretty decent on Game Pass, but I don't expect Scorn to sell a whole lot, to be honest with you. I think that the Persona 5 Royal is going to overperform my expectations. I had very low expectations for this. I'm going to be honest with you. It was yet another port of Persona. This has already been on PlayStation, so I was like, how many people on PS5 are really going to go out and buy this again, considering it's already been on PlayStation 4? But I suspect this is going to overperform. I don't think it's going to be ginormous, but my expectations were like rock bottom. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting much. So I think that's going to do better, at least than what I thought. Call of Duty is going to be a behemoth. Just effing crazy. Biggest beta ever, and it's, trust me, tracking giga ginormous. So we don't even need to talk about that. It will completely annihilate the month. Bayonetta, good. I think Bayonetta is going to do good. Again, don't expect crazy sales, but I think Bayonetta is going to be doing good. I hate to say it, breaks my heart. Star Ocean's probably going to do bad. These Square Enix releases, man, they're just not working, huh? I was a little bummed to see that, because I was really hopeful that we were going to see the return of that AA JRPG, because they've almost died. Like they're very common still on Switch, but what I mean is you see so little of them on PlayStation and Xbox nowadays. It's like JRPGs are like Dragon Quest and they're Final Fantasy and they're like the big guaranteed hits. You get a lot more of that on Switch, right? Because it's so healthy in Japan. But I wanted to see a return of this on PlayStation and Xbox where you got a lot of these, AA, not big budget JRPGs. But it looks like Diofield Chronicles bombed. Looks like Valkyrie Elysium bombed. And I'm not expecting Star Ocean to do well either. So that could literally put a halt to this, which would suck. If they have 3 bombs in a row that are these non-AAA JRPGs, that might be it. They might go back to just, okay, we're just doing Forspoken and Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, and then, they'll still do stuff on Switch. Like I said, that's going to always, because of its health in Japan, it's always going to get those mid-range budget JRPGs. But I'm talking about on the other platforms. So, I hope it does well, but Star Ocean I'm not feeling good about. So that's a few of my thoughts on some of the big ones. Randy Norman. I'm loving Overwatch 2 right now. Same. It's going to be in my top 10 games of the year. I don't understand all the hate it has been getting online. Well, I can tell you why, but let's finish this. Last week, I asked you about how successful do you think Overwatch 2 will launch be. So do you think it had a successful launch or not? Also, do you think Diablo 4 will have a bigger launch than Overwatch 2? So I adore Overwatch 2. I am also, though, however, a hardcore Overwatch 1 fan. It is my most played competitive multiplayer game of all time. So I've put, almost 2,000 hours into Overwatch. I'm familiar enough with Overwatch. A lot of newcomers that are coming in are like, it's the same thing as Overwatch 1. I can tell you from someone that was hardcore on Overwatch 1, Overwatch 2 plays radically different. Radically different. On concept, it's very similar. You have the heroes. You're doing, you have DPS and you have healers and it's objective and team-based. The way fights play out is just radically different. It is so much faster paced than Overwatch 1. It's unbelievable. Removing a tank 5v5, whether you like that or not, has radically changed the way encounters play out. They are far faster, far more lethal. DPS have become way more important than they were in Overwatch 1. Not that DPS wasn't important, but when you had double shield and you had healers and stuff, like DPS could do damage, but not to the degree they can in Overwatch 2. This game plays radically different if in terms of like the core aspects of it. But I think this would have, I'm going to be honest with you, Randy, I think this would have been an enormously successful launch because a lot of people that are playing it are loving it. The problem is the launch has been an utter disaster. It is the worst launch I've ever experienced. Now, am I going to tell you it's the worst launch of all time? No. There could be ones that are worse than this. Out of ones that I myself have played, no game has launched worse than Overwatch 2. Servers constantly crashing, constantly getting locked out of the heroes that I already own, battle passes just not showing up for millions and millions of people. It took me a week to get the stuff I gave them $40 for months ago, and it took a week for it to finally show up. I mean, there's no other way to put it than a pure and utter disaster. It is the worst launch I've ever experienced. Now, do I think Overwatch 2 is going to be healthy long term? Yes, I think it's going to be way healthier than Overwatch 1 long term. I'm going to be real with you. Do I think Overwatch 2 is going to be the most popular game in the world and more people are going to play it than Fortnite and Apex? No, I don't expect that. Do I expect it to be long-term way healthier than Overwatch 1? And people hate the free-to-play model, but listen, there's a reason why Overwatch 1 just stopped having content. Because there was no money to be made on that loot box system, the way it worked. Loot boxes are annoying, but Blizzard was extraordinarily generous in how they, gave you free loot boxes. You could get up to 3 per week for free just by playing the arcade mode and winning matches. And also, they would give you out additional loot boxes based off of like how high your people's opinion of you were, how high they rated you. As someone that played Overwatch 1 all the time, I basically had every item in the store and I never spent a penny on it. That's extremely generous. It's awesome as a consumer. However, in a live service game, it's not going to work. Like, you got to make money. So I actually understand the free-to-play shift. Does that mean that they've nailed it and it's perfect? No. I think the Battle Pass isn't too grindy. People are talking about being too grindy. I'm already level 25 after a week. This is going to go 9 weeks. I'm going to be done way before the season ends. I don't think it's too grindy. I think they could be better about what's in it, though. There's a lot of stuff that's just kind of meh. I think they need a stronger Battle Pass, more skins, things like that. But, Randy, I think most people that are playing Overwatch 2 think it's very good. If you look at Twitter, if you look at tweets blowing up about Overwatch, you're not seeing a ton of people be like, this game sucks. It's mostly like, dude, the game's really cool. Problem is it plays, or I can't play the game, right? The main complaints are around the free-to-play, but the actual core experience seems mostly liked, but it had an utterly disastrous launch. And they're going to have to do a lot to gain people back. I think there's some people that are going to bounce off for good because their first experience was so poor. Exiza, hey Benji, the announcement for tweet for Cyberpunk 2 had 190,000 likes. Still behind Grand Theft Auto 6 with 600,000. Yeah, nothing's going to touch Grand Theft Auto. And The Witcher 4 with 320,000. But is Cyberpunk one of the biggest, most hyped IPs right now? Yeah, there's no doubt in terms of just like a first game. I mean, that first game alone is over, what was it? It's over 20 million now. Was it 22 million now, I think? Something like that for the first game. As we know, legs were terrible, but they have radically improved. It's kind of crazy how well this game is still selling on Steam. It's still in the top 10, and it's back to $60. So, is Cyberpunk one of the bigger IPs again? I would say yes. Is it the biggest? No. But is it extremely healthy now? Dude, it's pretty legendary how CD Projekt Red turned around the image of that game. And also you got to give a lot of shout out to Trigger for the anime. But a lot of people write that off as, oh, well, it's just the anime. Guys, that anime wouldn't have been made if it wasn't for CD Projekt. Like, they helped fund and make the game, and they partnered with Trigger on it. So it's like, people want to take away from CD Projekt for that. I don't think you can do that because you would have never even gotten the anime without them. So, I mean, you got to give Trigger huge props too. They're the ones that actually made it. I'm not trying to take away from Trigger at all. I'm just saying the idea that, like, CD Projekt, they should have zero, goodwill from this. Well, you wouldn't have even gotten it if it wasn't for them. Like, there was no Cyberpunk anime planned until they partnered with Netflix and Trigger on it. So, they've turned it around a lot, but like I said last time we talked about this, Exiza, the key is Phantom Liberty. I'm telling you right now, that is a huge make or break moment for this franchise moving forward, because it's the first new piece of content in the IP that's a game since this launched, right? Besides like small updates, I mean like a big chunk. That has to be good. If that is terrible or huge performance issues at launch, we're right back to square one. All this goodwill that they've earned back, it's right back to zero. So that's going to hurt the sequel massively. If Phantom Liberty is a huge home run, they're headed in a great direction for the sequel. So I think the sequel will actually do very, very well if Phantom Liberty is really, really good. I don't think launch will be as big as Cyberpunk 2077 was, because 2077's hype was just like nothing we've almost ever seen. Literally, its launch was one of the biggest in the entire history of the industry. But I think even if the sequel has a smaller launch, I suspect that it might have way better legs, because the problem for 2077, ginormous launch, and then it fell off a cliff. You know what I mean? We could see a bit of an inverse with the sequel if it's good, where the launch isn't as crazy as 2077's was, but it just legs out way better. So, the IP's headed in a good direction, but they still aren't done yet. Phantom Liberty has to prove that they're back. Oh, and then Randy, do I think Diablo 4 will have a bigger launch than Overwatch 2? Oh, that is a great question, actually. People really underestimate how big the Overwatch brand is. Oh, that's such a good question, actually. Oh, man, I actually don't know. Some of you are going to think, oh, obviously Diablo 4. You guys really underestimate how big Overwatch 2 is with the PC competitive community. Freaking ginormous. Man, what a good question. And Overwatch 2 is completely free to play, while Diablo 4 is not. You are going to have to either buy Diablo 4 or play it through Game Pass. Randy, this is a fascinating question. I don't know. I honestly can't answer that one. I don't know, Randy. I literally don't. I don't have a good answer for you. I know it sucks, but I don't know. Overwatch 2 being free to play and being so popular with the competitive community. I mean, Overwatch is very popular in even like China. And there's a lot of Chinese Overwatch League teams. And, as we know, huge in South Korea. So, Wow, I don't know. That is hard to say. Federico Galvan. Hi, hey, let me make sure I haven't missed any super chats. I don't think I have, but I want to make sure. No, I have not. Split says Diablo 4 isn't on Game Pass. Well, it depends on when it launches. I scrolled down. Depends, Split. If they own Activision by then, it will be on Game Pass. But that really depends, right? We don't know when Diablo 4 is launching. So I would say if Microsoft owns Activision by then, they are going to put Diablo 4 Day 1 on Game Pass. However, it's true, Split End, if they haven't made the acquisition by then, it could not be. Really just depends. It all comes down to the timing of the acquisition and when that game's releasing. So it's a good point, Split End. It's not a guarantee, so I need to factor that. Here's what I will say. If Microsoft does not own Activision by the time Diablo 4 launches and it's not on Game Pass, Overwatch launch will be bigger. Diablo 4 launch will be enormous, but the free-to-play nature of Overwatch 2 will inherently, I believe, make that bigger because tons of people are trying it on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, even if they're not really that interested in Overwatch because it's free. So if there's no Game Pass version, I feel pretty darn confident Overwatch 2 will have a bigger launch. But if it's in Game Pass, then it gets a little more interesting. In terms of players, we're talking, right? Not revenue. Diablo 4 might have higher revenue because you're going to have to pay for it. Whereas Overwatch is free. Federico Galvan. And it's great to see you, Split End. Hi, Benji. Any idea on Steam Deck sales estimations? We know, over 1 million. With supply chain constraints beginning to ease up, do you have a ballpark number for hardware sales? Over 1 million. Doesn't sound like it's at 2 million from what was reported. If you missed this, it just came out last week. Valve themselves did not announce it, but it was someone that I believe that works on the Linux that runs it. I can't remember who exactly it was. Somebody was giving a talk, and they noted how it's over 1 million now. So it's over 1 million. It doesn't sound like it's like 5 million, 10 million. It sounds like it's over 1 million, which I said is pretty good, considering what it is, considering the hardware constraints, considering this is the first thing that Valve's ever done like this with this portable PC. You know, there's been other things kind of like in the past, but not directly from Valve. Over 1 million, I think, is a good start. Good start. Split End saying, love you, Benji. You're the man. Oh, I love you too, Split End. And you are also the man. Thanks for always being so supportive, buddy, and helping moderate the channel and just being a great friend. Eddie Brock, hello there, Benji. So it seems like PlayStation like to have cross-promotion brand synergy on their upcoming shows / movies. Big time. Big time. Did you guys see that they denied that that's part of why The Last of Us remake exists? Come on now. Come on now. I'm not going to tell you that, like... I'm not going to tell you the game wouldn't exist without that, right? Because it might have even started production before then. We know this has been in the works for a couple of years. But the idea that, like, that's not one of the reasons why they made sure this thing got done, because if you guys missed the reporting from Jason, at one point Naughty Dog wasn't making this. It was somebody else. If you think the idea that the show had zero say on to make sure this thing got done, come on. I don't buy that, Herman. Come on. Could be right, but Herman, I don't know about that one. But cross-promotion brand synergy, upcoming shows, movies, remakes. Do you think this means more remakes / remasters or new entries or both? Listen, if this Horizon remaster is real, again, the idea that this doesn't have any say because there's a Netflix show coming up, come on, man. Like, yes. I put it this way, if that's not what the way Sony's thinking, right? If, oh, this sort of thing would just exist either way, it just seems very unlikely to be true. It just seems unlikely to me. You never know. I mean, I could be totally wrong. I don't talk to Herman Hulse or Jim Ryan, right? But it does appear that way. From everything we're seeing, it appears that they are lining up remasters, remakes, things like that along shows. Do I think we will see more? For sure. Does that mean you're going to get one for like everything? Like you're definitely, and isn't there a new Twisted Metal game too? And there's a Twisted Metal show. Like, come on, dude. It all lines up. So I don't know that you're going to see like remakes, remasters, new games for every single thing that gets a TV show or movie. But are you going to see some of this? For sure. For sure. It's been able to be proven now through multiple different channels and avenues that cross synergy is a real thing. Split End, do you miss Bioshock as much as I do? Sad that it's stuck in development like it is. Very much so. If there's one game right now that seems very clearly in development hell, it's the next Bioshock. I don't know that, but this game was announced that it was being in production forever ago, and they still haven't even given you a title or CG trailer or anything. This game is definitely in development hell. Doesn't mean it won't be amazing, but yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer. I hope that it gets announced somewhat soon because it's been in development for a long time. Long time. And I do miss Bioshock. Yeah, I love the Bioshock games. Yoda Soda, Benji, do you think it is possible that Days Gone 2 might happen, especially since the movie is happening now, or do you think the franchise is done for good? It pains me to say it because I'm one of those people that really liked Days Gone. I got the platinum on it. I think it's done. A lot of the people that were instrumental on that franchise left Bend. Not everyone, there's still, most of Bend is still there, but some of the biggest players on that game left Bend. They're no longer even there. And Bend is all in on their new IP. I would say if the movie is somehow a huge success, maybe they revisit in the future. But I would say as of now, I think that IP is dead. Yeah, I don't think there will be a Days Gone 2. If the movie is a giant success, and whenever we say giant, I don't mean, it makes, $200 million at the box office. If this is a true and utter huge, over $500 million at the box office success, maybe. Maybe they think about Days Gone 2. And if they see a huge boost in sales for the first game alongside the movie, maybe they come back to it. Outside of that, I don't think you'll ever get Days Gone 2, no. Which I think's sad because I really liked that game, but, not everyone did. I think it's maybe the most underrated PlayStation exclusive. Like, modern PlayStation exclusive. I don't think it's number one, like the best PlayStation exclusive. I think there's better games than Days Gone, but most underrated. Like, if you look at its Metacritic score compared to how I felt about the game, I think it's probably their most underrated in recent years. But I also played it after its patch, and I heard it was really rough at launch. Drift23, sup Benji, do you think there will be a PS5 Slim? Yes, I believe that it's coming next year in September. Or PS5 1TB edition 2023 or 2024? Yes. Why do you think the PS5 only came with 825? The storage part, I have no idea. Do I think there's a Slim coming next year? Yes, because I believe that's what the discless PS5 is. That thing is an enormous monstrosity. They could save a lot of money by making it smaller. Yeah, I think you get PS5 Slim next year. And it completely replaces the current PS5. Now, whenever we say slim, I don't know that it's going to be small, but the PS5 is so freaking huge that even shrinking it a little bit is a big change because it's a freaking monster. So I do think you will get a slim next year, but again, I don't know how small it's actually going to be, but it should be smaller than the freaking huge tank that we have now. Miles Morales, do you think PlayStation could receive some of their old franchises back, like Resistance, Jack and Daxter, etc.? Yes. Yeah. Or revive, you mean? Yeah, I could see some of them. What all is going to come back, I don't know. But I could see so. I think Resistance has got to get a remaster or remake, right? Like, people, every single time I look at Insomniac's, tweets, there's always people like, where's Resistance? Where's Resistance? Where's Resistance? I would at least like to see that trilogy get a remaster. Even if they don't make a brand new game, I would like to see Resistance get a nice 4K, 60 FPS, really nice remaster of the 3 games. I think it would do decent. I don't think it would be like a juggernaut seller, but I think a nice remastered trilogy would do pretty decent. As long as I didn't spend a fortune on it. How long have I been going? Oh, good. I'm going to keep going a little bit longer. I know I started later today than normal, but I'm going to still go for a little bit. Do you think we'll have cross-gen titled when the... Do you think we will have cross-gen titled when the time comes around for PS6 to release? Oh, do you think there will be cross-gen? Yeah. Or do you think the huge backlash to happen will make companies focus on next-gen only? No. You'll still get cross-gen. You're always going to have cross-gen during a console transition phase because of, just install base. It's just math. No. There'll definitely still be cross-gen titles on PS6. Now, I don't know that it's going to go as long as it did this gen. I think the pandemic really affected things this time around. We're going to be going on over 2 years. We're going to still have cross-gen games over 2 years after launch, and not a couple, a lot. anytime you do have a cross-gen period, sports games and like Call of Duty are going to be cross-gen for a really long time. But like, this has been the longest cross-gen phase where we see like everything. Like, there's still only a handful of current-gen games that are current-gen only. So I suspect you're still going to definitely see cross-gen on PS6. I don't think it will be like this, though, where we're going to go like, 2.5, potentially longer years where almost everything's cross-gen, but a few games. That I don't expect. JCat saying hi and saying don't forget to hit the like button. I appreciate it so much. JCat, I appreciate everything you do. Hit the like button if you like doing these chats. And I think we just had a super chat come in. Highlander001 with a 10. Very generous of you, Highlander, and great to see you. Benji, I'm sorry I'm late. It's all good, Highlander. No sweat at all. Though I'm sweating, I'm going to be real with you. You don't care. If Microsoft buys into developers instead of outright buying them, buying into, like investing without a full-on purchase, would that stop Sony from preventing them from keeping games off of Xbox? So you mean like Square Enix, for example, if they invested, this is a hypothetical, like how that's exclusive. Keeping games off of Xbox. It's a potential strategy you could use, but I don't think it's one they should. I think if you're going to invest, unless it's like a really big dog, like we've seen like Sony do with Epic, for example, where Sony's buying into Epic, but they're not outright buying Epic. Unless it's something like that, I would say no, they shouldn't. I just kind of think it might be a waste of money considering they have the kind of capital to just outright buy studios. Sony's very smart in that investing in someone like Epic because it's almost a guaranteed payback, and Sony doesn't have the type of capital that Microsoft does, right? So it just helps their gaming division in general. Microsoft's got so much money that they can just buy people. Sony does too, but we know Microsoft to a whole different level. So could it be a potential strategy, right? Invest in someone, buy a certain amount of the company without buying the whole thing just to make sure you get those games. It's a theoretical one that could work. I personally, though, wouldn't advise it. I would just say outright buy companies. Not all of them, right? But buy some companies. And here's the thing, Microsoft is trying to get themselves to the spot that like Netflix is, where it's just you just have your own pipeline of stuff that's so heavy and so often that you don't really need third party. That's a reality of it. I told you guys this back whenever there was only a few studios being acquired, back before they even bought Bethesda. I was like, literally this is happening because Game Pass. Like, the idea that they bought all these studios just to be like, hey, PlayStation, if we get an exclusive list next to each other in the next 3 years, we'll be able to have a longer list than you. That is not why this happened. Microsoft bought all these studios and bought all these publishers because they know to have a high subscription base without high churn. Churn is the word that is used in the entertainment industry for people that, like, let's say, come in and subscribe for a month and then they bounce for 6 months. And then they come back for a month and then they bounce until something else they care about. In order to prevent churn, you need a ton of stuff. Like, you need something every single month. Every single month where people are like, ooh, I need to play that. Ooh, I need to play that. Ooh, I need to play that. Or ooh, I need to watch that on Netflix. Ooh, I need to watch that on Disney Plus. That's how you prevent churn. People feel like they have to stay subscribed because they can't ever leave because the next month has something they want anyways. Microsoft is buying all these studios, buying all these publishers so that eventually, we haven't seen it pay off yet, but eventually they're at this spot where it's like you can't churn as a Game Pass member because you're like, dang, this game just came out that's a huge exclusive, Starfield or whatever. And then 2 months later, oh my God, now Forza's out. And then 2 months later, oh my God, Redfall's out. Like, I got to stay subscribed to Game Pass. They're trying to get themselves to that point to where it doesn't really matter if third party are in Game Pass or not. Don't get me wrong. Are they going to always want third party there? Sure. But they want to get to the point where first party is so heavy on releases, it doesn't really matter. That way, if you don't get the Game Pass deal with, say, Take-Two on something, you're like, who cares? We got enough of our own product. People aren't going to churn anyways. That's exactly what Netflix does. It's exactly why Disney's making so many shows. So Microsoft investing in games companies so they don't skip, okay, might work, Highlander, but it's better to just outright buy some studios and make sure you have more games hitting Game Pass. Thank you for that super chat. Really appreciate it. And you rock, Highlander. All right. Let's see where we're at. Justin Tanhill, do you think using AI in gaming will be a good or bad thing? I think it depends how it's used. I think AI is going to become a huge part of game development because I think AI is going to become a huge aspect of every level of our society. You will not be able to go through your day without interacting with AI. You're already kind of at that point. People don't realize that, but there's already, if we're talking very, very, very basic forms of AI and stuff, you're already tiny ones, right? We're already interacting with that very, very regularly, and you don't even realize it's seamless. Now, I think that's going to become way more pronounced. In fact, I don't think, I know. And if you talk to anyone in tech, they'll all tell you the same thing. It's inevitable. So do I think that AI is going to be a big part of gaming and game development in, say, the next 20 years? Yes, because I think it's going to be everywhere. Like I said, I don't think you will have any day in your life where you're not interacting with AI in some way, shape, or form in the coming 20 years. Whether that's people, AI's taking your order for food or AI's shipping products. Like, trust me, AI is going to be everywhere. So do I think there's ways that we're going to be able to leverage it for gaming? Yeah, I think so. In the game development scene, I think there might be some things that we haven't even thought about yet that AI will be able to help with asset generation and things like that. That will make games, we just had this discussion last week about how such a threat it is to AAA gaming, how long games take to make. If you could leverage AI to where those games come out quicker because they can help you, you already see this sort of thing to a very rudimentary degree with like open world games. A lot of them use like open world generation tools and then artists come through and clean things up. I think that's going to become actually way more common. We might get to a kind of point where you can have AI generate a ton of stuff, the textures, models, things like that. And then artists, the people designing the game, they can come through and just clean everything up. So you can maybe reduce the time on these sort of things. So I think there's ways AI can be used that are going to be very, very good to the gaming industry. Like, how awesome would it be, guys, if we got to a point where AAA games now, like a big studio, they're going to have a AAA game every 3 years, very regularly, right? Maybe some delays sometimes, but you could just count on it. Naughty Dog, 3 years, you're going to get another big, Last of Us sized game. Would be awesome. So there's ways it could be very good. We talked about one way I think it could be very, very bad. If we got to a point where AI is just outright replacing voice actors, right? Because there's that report about how companies were using it for placeholder, and then later, people were going to come in and do the actual dub. If it got to the point where there was just no voice actors and they just AI generated everything, it got that good, they could just replace the whole voice acting community. That would be, I think, a negative, because people are just losing careers. If AI got so advanced that it replaced, huge chunks of the development community, I think that would be bad too. I think we need to leverage AI in a way that's helpful in developing things, and it will be, and not just like outright, hey, it's going to just take all your jobs. That's going to be the relationship with AI in general in the future. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out, because there are very real ways AI could completely replace huge chunks of the world in terms of like tasks. It's inevitable, honestly, unless we put things in place to say, hey, we're going to allow AI to help us to a certain level, but not necessarily replace us on things. And this might sound like sci-fi to you guys. It's not. It's just not. It's not sci-fi. Unless we all blow ourselves up first, which is possible. Sounds PP7. When will EA show their college football game? Great question. And what should they focus on given Madden, and this is the first NCAA game in 10 years? Should they bring back the RPG stuff from the PS2 career modes? Ooh, I hope. I actually used to, so I don't play any football or FIFA or basketball or any of that nowadays. But back in the day when I did play, I used to like the NCAA games way more than Madden, because like you said, there was like that RPG aspect to it. I thought that was really fun. And so I would love to see that. I think it'll be really big because, like you said, it's been so long. But I have no idea when they'll show it, Silence. No idea. Good question. I was just having this conversation with Samuel Tolbert. Where's Jedi Survivor, speaking of EA? Supposedly that game's coming out in March. And we have not seen anything in-game on it. We had that one trailer, but it was CG. That game's going to come out in 5 months. And we have seen nothing in game. So EA's got a lot they got to show. Stuff Sean, Microsoft clapbacked at CMA. They seem biased. I actually somewhat agree to a degree that some of their statements do feel very, very influenced by Sony. I will say that. Like I said, I thought it was good that they were doing their due diligence on some aspects, right? You don't want to just instant move this thing through because it is going to have huge, far-reaching impacts on the industry. But some of the statements, like the one we talked about, where they were talking about how, like, Xbox can't have anything Call of Duty related that PlayStation doesn't get. I mean, what? Have you looked at the video game industry in the last 30 years? Tons of multi-platform games have exclusive content. Like, it's very, very common. So some of it did feel like crazy Sony bias, if I'm being honest with you. And I don't think that there's Sony biases and they're like, ooh, I'm a PlayStation fanboy. Like, I really doubt that that's going on. I just think Sony might be doing an amazing job lobbying in the UK. They might be doing a very good job of that, which is their job. It's what they should be trying to block this. Not the CMA, but Sony. Sony should be doing everything in their power to make sure this doesn't happen. Anything less is OBS disconnected. Hopefully you guys can see me. It says excellent connection on here, but I got a warning that OBS disconnected. So hopefully you guys can see me. We'll see. Gotham Knights, if you guys missed, Silence is asking me how I think Gotham Knights is going to do. Not good. I think this game needs to review very well. If it does not review very well, I think this is a potential bomb in the making. It's going to get some people in the door no matter what because it's a Batman game. It's not Batman, but it's DC and superheroes. But I am highly questionable about the quality of this game. I don't know if you guys saw that clip that went viral about the Livin' La Vida Loca. I thought it looked truly terrible. And I feel bad. You guys rarely hear me say anything negative. I thought that clip looked truly terrible. I was kind of dumbfounded by it. So we'll see. I hope it's good, but I'm not feeling good about it. Lucas Bob says, Benji, did you see the new Starfield info? I did not. I did not see new Starfield info. Oh, Split'End says there's already a new Terminator game being done. Perfect. Like I said, I'm not surprised. Good shout out, Split'End. Good shout out. I did not know that. Like I said, I feel like that's an IP that's just never going to completely die. Brad Myers, what are your thoughts on the Meta acquisitions? I mean, it makes sense. It just makes sense, right? I mean, Meta is trying to, get as much VR technology as possible. If you guys missed this, they bought a couple VR studios. It makes sense. I would say Sony needs to lock some of these. Split'End made a great point to me about this whenever it happened. Sony does, I feel like, need to lock down a few more VR developers if they're really as in on PSVR 2 as it sounds like, because they have stiff competition in Meta for those acquisitions. Because Meta has way ridiculous amounts of money and they're all in on VR, right? Sony's kind of has VR, whereas Meta is all in on VR. So I would say if Sony is very serious about PSVR 2, they need to make sure that they lock down A, either some of these studios, or B, some of the talent at these studios, because Meta is going to acquire a lot of them because they're like desperate for it. Their whole business right now practically is being built on VR. JCat, you can do it, Benji. Thank you so much, JCat. You can be a full-time content creator and streamer. Maybe, we'll see. I'll be honest. If I could do anything I wanted, like if this is just a hypothetical scenario, if they came to me, some higher power came to me and they're like, Benji, you can either A, go work for someone else writing for them, at a big company like IGN or something, or, you could go work for Microsoft or Sony, or you could just do it all yourself. Some people are going to want to work, for IGN. They want to be known as like working, at the big IGN side, or some people are going to want to go work for a publisher or developer. Don't get me wrong. I would not turn either of those things down. They would be amazing. But if I could just have my goal, my dream, what would it be? It would be to do it on my own. I love being able to just cover everything, not having to be all in on one brand. Like if you work for a certain company, you're not really going to be able to tweet about the whole industry. I turned down an analyst job one time. Let me correct myself here. I shouldn't say I turned down an analyst job. I turned down a potential opportunity for an analyst job. I won't name the company, but a company was potentially interested in hiring me as an analyst, and I actually turned it down because I was afraid it was going to really limit what I could do on social media. During the interview question we had, it was basically implied to me, that I had to be a lot more careful about what I tweet about, because you're going to be handling so much sensitive info. I turned it down. I didn't do it. And some of you are going to be like, Benji, you're an idiot. Why would you turn that down? I really value what I do on Twitter. I love it, guys. Like, some people will talk about how they hate Twitter or whatever. I love what I do on Twitter. It is like a huge part of my life, interacting with the overall gaming community, being able to tweet about everything, being able to be like, hey, if I think this game's doing awesome, if I think this game is maybe going to underperform, and just being able to tell you my thoughts. If I work as just an analyst somewhere, you guys don't get that no more, right? And maybe some of you don't care, but I feel like if you're here in the stream or if you follow me on Twitter, you do it because you're kind of interested in my takes, potentially that all goes away. Like, for real. Potentially it's very limited what I can talk about. So my dream would be to where I could somehow sustain myself, to where I can just completely do everything I do, whether that's newsletters, whether that's Patreon, whether that's whatever. That's the dream. Don't get me wrong, if Microsoft comes up to me and they're like, Benji, we want you to work for Xbox and we want to give you a great job at Xbox, I'm going to take it, guys. It's going to be A, amazing to work in the industry, and B, get out of freaking retail. But if it was a dream, I'd want to just do it myself and keep doing what I do because I really love doing it. Michael, you get Matt Piscatella to hire you at MPD, Benji. I won't go into it, but there's a 0% chance of that. That is never going to happen. That will never happen. Trust me on that one. Ryan Kelly, good to see you on another live chat, Benji. Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm just going to do a few more and then I'm out. Peter 420, personally, I believe that Microsoft will acquire another publisher in a few years. Not impossible. And after all, if the publisher wants to sell, what's the issue? Besides just a matter of time until Tencent, Saudi Arabia, etc., you're not wrong about this part. Explode and start buying publishers too. Microsoft would lead, but that's because they're the only company who's investing into cloud subscription areas. Peter, you're not completely wrong on this, right? I said I personally don't want to see them get a ton more publishers because I do think there's a danger in too much publisher consolidation. I do want to still see some healthy big third-party publishers. But Peter, I will say you raise a great point. Like, people are framing it that's just Microsoft. It's not going to just be Microsoft, right? There's going to be other big players that make some big ones too. Tencent's the sleeping giant in terms of like what a lot of the Western, audience doesn't realize is how aggressively Tencent is in acquisitions and investing in companies too. Like, everywhere. Tencent has its fingers, even if they don't fully own someone, in so many companies you wouldn't even believe it. So it's like, you'd raise a good point in that if it's not Microsoft, it's going to be someone else that does some of these big acquisitions. You are right. I do think a lot of consolidation is inevitable. I'm just a little afraid of, I love Microsoft. I love Xbox. I don't know, though, if I want to see them buy like 3 more publishers. I don't know about that. Developers, like I said, go ham. Buy whoever you want. Like, it does not matter. And that does not matter. There should never be a cap on how many independently owned studios you can buy. Buy as many as you want. Me and you could go out and start a studio tomorrow if we want. We can't go out and start a AAA publisher. See what I mean? Like, that's the difference. You can start infinite developers. Me, with $50 in my bank account, could, license out Unreal Engine or whatever, or Unity or whatever, and give them a cut if I could make a game. I can't, however, go up and start the next Activision. That's a whole different area. All right, we're going to close it down soon. I'm going to do a couple more and I leave. Yeah, Jackson Day. I worked a couple years in fast food, and as a manager, I had to deal with some of the rudest people ever. Yeah, it's similar in retail, man. Like I said, I've been doing this for, what is that now? 2007 is when I started. So 10, 15 years. Yeah, I've dealt with a lot. And I don't want to say retail's nothing but bad. You meet some amazingly kind people too. But, 15 years of retail will do a number on you, let me tell you. It really will. Marvin, who do you expect to compete with Game Pass if these publisher acquisition walls off Google, Amazon, etc. from entering the industry? Sony. I think the idea that Sony's just going to like die because Microsoft's going to potentially be very successful with Game Pass is kind of crazy talk. Like PlayStation is an enormous brand. That's one difference that I have with like some of these, not legislators, but some of these like investigations they're doing. They're acting like Sony's just going to like keel over and die as soon as this acquisition happens. And I'm like, you guys realize PlayStation is arguably the most powerful brand in gaming, right? Don't get me wrong, Nintendo's been enormously successful with the Switch. If you want to talk about historical, Nintendo might have more beloved overall known brands, to be honest with you, like Mario and things like that. But if you want to just talk about like, in terms of like the amount of revenue that's generated off PSN and stuff like this, it's like the idea that Sony is just going to keel over and die is crazy talk. Like, we might get to a scenario where Microsoft's bigger than Sony for overall ecosystem. I actually don't think that's a crazy idea, guys. I think Game Pass is going to continue to grow. I think streaming will be additive to the market, and I think it will become a bigger thing, but never the main thing. But I think it will grow the market. Could I see a scenario eventually where Microsoft has potentially a bigger ecosystem than Sony in revenue? I can see such a future. Can I see a future where Sony just is like gone and just, PlayStation died? No. I mean, the PS3 didn't kill them. Like, dude, they're gonna be fine. Now, will they be number one? I don't know about that. But like this idea that Sony's just gonna like PlayStation's gonna disappear, and it's crazy talk. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Marvin. I'm saying I do see these comments like, oh, poor Sony, PlayStation's done. Like, what? What are you talking about? I don't even understand that. So I would say if anyone's going to compete with them in subscriptions, right, because we're talking subscriptions, it would be Sony. But I will say it's going to be a challenge. Microsoft has the advantage there because of their capital. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. That is not up for debate. But the question isn't, can Sony be bigger than Game Pass? That's not your job as, someone protecting the industry, a watchdog. It's not to make sure Sony stays number one. The idea is, can Sony compete with Game Pass? Sure. Yeah, they can. Depends on if they want to go that route, but could they do it? Yes, I think they could. Jason, sorry I'm late. Why do you think PlayStation have no big first-party showcases this year? Isn't it weird? Yes, it's very bizarre. Do you think their teams are just not ready? Yes. Yep, that's what I've said before. I've seen even a few PlayStation fans that were like super mad about it before, and now be like, it's fine. It's not really fine, if you're going to be honest, guys. Like, it's not fine for a company to just not show you any sort of roadmap for a year. Like, it's not okay. You should demand more from these companies. That being said, if no showcase happens this year, Jason, that's been my theory all along. Trust me, if Sony could have an awesome showcase, they would have had one. And they might still. There still is time. They could maybe squeeze one in the next couple weeks. I don't think they'll have one in November or December, though. So it'd have to be by the end of October, because I think it'll just be too busy for the holiday season. Maybe if they want to bring back PlayStation Experience, they could do December. But it is weird. If you don't get one, it has to be because the teams aren't ready. Has to be. Chris, Benji, any chance getting the stream as a podcast? I should do it. People ask me for it all the time. I don't have any idea how to do it. I think I'd have to record my audio separately and then upload it. Chris, I am so DIY. I'm sure, as you can tell from my thumbnails in my room, I'm running the bare bones on this thing. And obviously, if I do get my dream of being able to transition to a content creator, Chris, I'm going to have to do significantly better. So I'm aware I'm going to have to learn a lot of things. I'm going to have to brand a lot of things better. But if you're asking, like, Chris, why it hasn't happened yet, I have no idea how to do it. So that would be your explanation. If I knew how to make this just a podcast, I would do that, alongside the YouTube chat. So maybe I would. I don't know if people would love to just listen to it on audio, but maybe they would. My stream is very different. Like, there's not many people that do this sort of stream, right? It's usually like a podcast with guests and things like that. This is like really interactive. So I don't know how well this would translate to just audio after the fact. But maybe it would. Maybe people would be interested in that. But it's so interactive and like us talking to each other. I don't know. I don't know how it would go with just audio. All right, one or two more. One or two more, and I got to go. Which we made it almost to the end, actually. So great. That's great. We did a good job this time, guys. Wow. Actually, I got almost all of them. Eddie Brock, what's your thoughts on Herman saying they only acquire studios that fit like a glove? Does that eliminate acquisitions like Square Enix? Overall thoughts on PlayStation strategy to acquisitions? Eddie, I would say that Herman's claim there is mostly backed up. If you look at most of the acquisitions that Sony has done, it is with people they have relationships with, right? Bungie, yes, they were at one point owned by Microsoft, but like there was a huge partnership between Sony and Bungie on Destiny, right? You saw for years and years where Sony got content before Xbox by like sometimes a huge margin. I think it was up to a year. You know, you had like bundled hardware bundles that had Destiny in them. Like there was a huge partnership between Sony and Bungie. So, you know, you saw that. So, you know, it makes sense, right? Someone they worked with a ton over the years on Destiny. You saw, you know, Housemarque, who they had a great relationship with, you know, Returnal and previous games than that. You saw Bluepoint, who they had, you know, numerous games with in the past. So it's like, do I think Herman's being honest here? Yeah, Insomniac, right? We all know the history of Insomniac and Sony. So do I think Herman's like telling the truth on this one? Yeah, I think he is telling the truth. I think they mostly want to acquire people that they do have good relationships with. I don't think they're as aggressive about being like, let's just find a random studio and buy them. Not that I'm saying Microsoft does that, but I think Microsoft's a little more willing to do something like that because of the money they have. Whereas Sony, I think they are really just mostly focused on people they have good relationships with maybe a few exceptions. Would it affect Square Enix? No, because I would say that is one of the companies they do have a good relationship with. If you look at all the exclusives that Square Enix makes for them, I've always said I don't expect Square Enix to happen because I think they have so much success on Nintendo platforms as well. I don't know that they would want to lose that, even by being acquired, but not impossible. But yeah, I think that is true, Eddie. I think most of the acquisitions for Sony you'll probably see coming. It'll probably be like whenever they announce them, you're going to be like, yeah, makes sense. And yeah, Travel Peck is laying out some good examples about Square Enix. They have Final Fantasy, who PS executives love, manga IP, Sony Pictures Crunchyroll, anime IP, Sony Pictures Crunchyroll, and Sony Pictures recently acquired a manga maker company to work inside Crunchyroll. So Square Enix fits the glove, but of course Herman is not going to hint any of that. Yeah, Travel, like I said, I haven't ever said that. Some people say Square Enix is impossible. I don't think it's impossible, but I do think that is a bit of a long shot, but it's not impossible. I've always said that I could see that happening, like a scenario. The big problem is losing Nintendo. That's the big problem for Square Enix. That would be the thing they'd have to debate with themselves. If they think being part of Sony would just be naturally healthy enough for them as a company, you know, that they could lose Nintendo and still be confident that they'll be able to survive well under Sony without layoffs and stuff, right? If the games start underperforming. That's the big question, because a lot of Square Enix games get sold on Switch. You know, maybe not like Final Fantasy 16, but like if you look at their overall library. Atlantic Canadian Gamer just got a PS5 and I was surprised at this size. I knew it was big, but my goodness, it's a behemoth. The freaking PS5 is a monster. I like the PS5. Like, I think it looks pretty cool. It's weird but cool, but it is freaking huge, dude. All right, we're almost done. One or two more. Ryan Kelly, Benji, do you see Sony buying a studio that solely develops VR games? It would demonstrate commitment to the VR space like Meta's 10 studios, but I don't think they're confident enough for it. One thing I can say here, a rumor that is floating around that I believe has quite a bit of credence to it is that most of all of Sony's first-party studios are making PSVR 2 content. Now, I cannot tell you that every one of those studios is. I have reason to believe that that rumor is pretty accurate. Now, does that mean that I think all of Sony's studios are all making standalone, full-on gaming experiences? That I don't know. Do I think that you're going to get some sort of experience, even if it's built into a normal game from almost all of Sony's first-party studios? Yes. And do I think that will include Naughty Dog? Yes. And do I think that will include Sony Santa Monica? Yes. I think all of the big players. There is some rumors going around that have been around for a while that that's been a bit of a mandate within Sony, is that they expect their first-party teams to support in some ways PlayStation VR 2. Again, do I think that that means necessarily that Naughty Dog is going to come out and ship The Last of Us VR for $60? That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But could I see a scenario where whatever Naughty Dog's next game is, whether that's The Last of Us Part 3, whether it's a new IP, whatever, that even if the whole game's not playable in VR, because I don't expect that sort of thing, but could you have an experience where it's like The Last of Us Part 3, this hypothetical, comes out, and then also packaged with it, there's like a 2 or 3 hour experience that's separate from the main game where you can have a VR experience in the Last of Us world. I think you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff this gen, where their studios are supporting PSVR 2, but not necessarily releasing huge standalone games that take away resources from their main product. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I do think you're going to see some of their studios make full VR games, like we're seeing Guerrilla do with Call of the Mountain, which they're having help with, but Guerrilla's all in on that. Or like I expect Insomniac to release some pretty significant VR games. I can tell you, I do expect that. Would it be smart to buy a VR-only studio? Probably, if they really are as all-in on PSVR 2 as it sounds, but we'll have to see. I do think you're going to get a lot from first party this time around, though, unlike PSVR 1. All right, I think I'm going to go. I think I got them all. Pretty much all done. I think I got 2 or 3 questions right here at the bottom, and then I'm going to call it, guys, the ones that are here in chat. And then we're going to bounce. John Scott, Benji, when all is said and done, what's your Switch final unit sales? What's your prediction? Ooh, great question as we round it out. I think there's like 2 more after this I'm going to hit. Where do I think Switch finishes? It's at 111, right? Let me make sure I'm not crazy. Switch is currently at 111, and that was as of last quarter, right? Let me see. Pretty sure it's 111. I want to make sure I'm right, though. Yeah, 111. And that was last quarter. Man, you know what? I think it's going to get kind of close to PS2. I think it's going to get pretty close. It's definitely going to be over 130. I mean, that's not even a debate. Can it get over 140 or 150? Part of this is going to depend on the launch timing, John, of Switch 2. I would say 130 plus million is a lock. 140 is even likely, to be honest. PS2's 158. I don't know, man. That is pretty freaking high. 155, 158. I would say I'm not as 1,000% sure of it hitting PS2 numbers. I'm 1,000% sure it does 130, and I'm pretty confident it does 140. 150 though, I think a lot of that depends on Switch 2. But it's definitely getting over 130 and very likely 140. The PS2 record is going to be interesting. It depends on how Switch 2 affects it, right? We need to see how that impacts things. I don't think it's impossible, though. It could get to 150. I don't think it's impossible, but we need to see what Switch 2 does to the console. Peter, bigger threat for acquisitions in your opinion, Benji, Tencent or Saudi Arabia? Tencent. I think Tencent's the most dangerous of anyone, except for Microsoft right now. But I would say if you say outside of Microsoft and what they're doing with Activision Blizzard, what's the number one company that could potentially acquire just anybody at any given moment? Tencent. They are big. Oh yeah, this is true too. We didn't even talk about this. Bigelow, CMA's disregard for Nintendo as a player is weird. It is bizarre. They like didn't even reference Nintendo. It's like only about PlayStation, which is why I agree with some of the comments people are saying where some of their commentary sounds extremely biased. I mean, Microsoft themselves called that out. Like, you don't usually see language like that. Microsoft themselves were basically like, yo, your response sounds like it's straight from Sony. It does, dude. It does. And like I said, I can't see the people at CMA being PlayStation fanboys. I think that Sony's doing an amazing job lobbying with them, though. Because they send people, dude. That's what they do. Jim Ryan went over there. They send people to have these conversations and be like, listen, this is why you shouldn't let it happen. I think that Sony is just probably doing an amazing job at that with the CMA. They're being very convincing, I think. But it is weird. Like, guys, we're just going to ignore the console that has 111 million install base and is crushing everyone on first-party sales and just, like, acting like they're also not part of the market. Huh? Yeah, that is a little weird. They, like, didn't even pretend like Nintendo was nothing. Goes in the Garage Gaming. Benji, do you think that if this acquisition goes through, doesn't this acquisition kind of back Microsoft Xbox into a corner with any further publishers of a big publisher? I kind of think it does. I've said this before. I think if they get this, that they're not going to allow any more big publishers. I think they're going to allow all the developers in the world, but I think, like, do I think Microsoft could suddenly announce after this deal is done that they're going to buy EA or Take-Two? I don't. They got so much pushback on this one in Europe and UK that I think that kind of sent the message, like, I think this is going to squeak through in the end, but I think it's going to be that kind of message where it's like, okay, we let you get away with this one, but the next time it's not going to happen. So I do think so. I don't think you see any big publishers after this from them, yeah. But I do think you see more studios. Okay, last one here. This is the last question. From Monster MJ. Benji, love what you do and keep it up. What is your take on kids playing games? Great question. And do you have any tips? How do you deal with that when they want to start playing? How do you do it? Monster MJ, this is a great question. So my daughter is 4, and she can now play touchscreen games. She hasn't really made the evolution to the controller yet. She did play her first ever controller game a couple times, that Peppa Pig game. Shout out to Game Pass. I didn't have to buy it. I could just install Peppa Pig and let her play. And I'll tell you what, she did pretty good on it. My advice on gaming, again, I only have a 4-year-old, so I can't speak to people that have teenagers and stuff like this. However, I've worked retail so long that I've sold lots of games to kids, you know, directly to them or parents asking and buying. So I have a pretty, I would say, okay idea on this one. Not as amazing as some people that had kids completely grow up and raise them all the way through. My strategy is I'm going to be very careful with what I allow her to play on age dependent. This might sound surprising, but a shocking amount of people, I worked for GameStop for many, many years, and a shocking amount of people would buy Grand Theft Auto for their little kids. I personally would never do that. Who am I? I had this talk last time, right? I don't consider myself the bastion of morality as a person. So I'm very always hesitant to give advice on what morality things people should do because, dude, people look at life very different ways, right? Obviously, there's key things that we're all going to disagree with. Hey, you shouldn't murder someone. Hey, you shouldn't, there's going to be things we all agree on. But there is also going to be some stuff that's a little more gray where it's going to really depend how you look at life. And I'm always a little hesitant on giving advice on that. What I will say is that, personal speaking, I'm going to totally let my daughter game as long as it doesn't interfere with her, like, school, right? If it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you're playing so much games, you're not doing your schoolwork. Obviously, I'm going to have to put the foot down on that. I'm not like some parents, though, where I'm like going to be like, you can't game hardly at all. Like, you can only game for like 1 hour. As long as you're getting your schoolwork done, as long as you're a productive person, as long as you're a good person, if you want to game for 4 hours a night, go for it. I don't care. Like, as long as your life is good, right? You're doing the right thing. You're getting your schoolwork done. You're being nice to people. You're not being a jerk. Game all you want. As long as it's age appropriate, I'm not going to let her, at 6 years old play Grand Theft Auto, okay? I think that might be a little too extreme on my book, but as long as she's playing the right age-appropriate games, doing well in life, I'm not going to be like super critical of her hobbies, all right? I think some parents can be a little too controlling. I think we've all had experiences with that, whether it's your own parent being controlling or you've seen other parents being too controlling. I think some people want to live their kids' lives for them, I'm not in that space. If she doesn't want a game when she's 10 and she wants to go play soccer or she wants to, go do jujitsu or whatever she wants, that's fine. If she wants to game 3 or 4 hours a night and she's still getting stuff done, that's fine too, right? As long as she's being a good person. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it there. Thank you so much for a great chat. Thank you so much for all of the kind words. Thank you guys so much for all of the support, as you always do. Thank you for the fantastic questions as well, guys. That's what makes these chats so fun. If you don't follow me on Twitter, follow me on Benji-Sales. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe. We do one of these chats every single week. This week wasn't as heavy with gaming news, but luckily we still had some great questions for it. We'll be back next week. I'm going to try to start pumping out more content. I'm still going to just stick to 1 stream a week, but as I start to do stuff, I'm going to start toying with some ideas. Don't expect a flood soon, but I'm going to start toying with some things where I try and figure out what I'm going to do next year, guys. So thank you so much. You guys are all amazing. Stay safe. Play some games. I will catch you either here on Twitter very soon, or I will see you here on YouTube next week. All right, guys? Have a great one. Bye. Bye, 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 bye.